Hello and welcome to another episode of Cooking from Quarantine. Today we are making oven barbecued brisket. This recipe is very kind of southern in nature. It's a perfect way to get that smoky, delicious barbecue flavor while not having access to a grill if you live in an apartment building, and not having access to a smoker even if you do live in the burbs. So all of these flavors are very kind of down south, smoky, spicy, real classic barbecue flavors. So here are our briskets, and what I did with the brisket was first I made a dry-ish rub, and I'll show you how I made that. So here's what we're going to need to make our dry-ish dry rub for our barbecue brisket. The first and most important ingredient is liquid smoke. We're going to need 4 tablespoons of this, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 1 teaspoon of celery salt, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of either onion salt or onion powder. I have onion granules, so that's what I'll be using. 1.5 tablespoons of paprika. I prefer smoked paprika. I prefer using as many smoky ingredients as I can in my barbecue, so that's what I'll be using, but regular paprika is just fine. 1 teaspoon of ground cumin. 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And then you need 1 teaspoon of salt. So I happen to have garlic salt in the house, and this delicious birch smoked salt that I got while I was in Iceland. I'm going to be using a combination of these to make my teaspoon of salt, but you can use regular kosher salt. That's absolutely fine. I'm just trying to introduce more smoky ingredients into this. So let's prepare our dry-ish rub. Here we have our brisket, our bowl, and our measuring cups. So we're going to use 4 tablespoons of our liquid smoke, and liquid smoke is just really interesting. It makes it seem like you put your food into a smoker, 2. So it's perfect for 3, for when you don't want to be using a smoker or don't have access to a smoker. So if you are barbecuing at home and don't want to make a smoky mess in your backyard, or if you're barbecuing like we are today in our oven, this is 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. It's okay that we just got a little on our brisket. So if you're going to be making this in the oven like we are, it really adds that kind of smoky barbecue flavor without having to introduce an element of smoke into your home and your life. 1 teaspoon of celery salt. I've been using celery salt a lot lately. I think it's a really interesting flavor. It's 1 teaspoon of that. Just right into the liquid, because we're making, it's technically not a dry rub because we added some liquid ingredients to it, but the amount of dry ingredients we're adding to it, it kind of makes it like a paste. Oh, I didn't open this. Come on. There we go. Teaspoon of our granulated onion, teaspoon of cumin, so yeah, we're really making more of a paste to put onto our brisket. And this is the brisket that I have left over from that huge order from Baldor that I got. We never did a teaspoon of garlic powder, so I'll be adding that. So I had put it in my my kind of vacuum seal contraption, and the brisket froze beautifully, actually. Now we need 1 teaspoon of salt, so I'm going to be using half a teaspoon of this amazing smoked our garlic salt, and then half a teaspoon of this smoked salt that's so yummy and weird and wild. And then we are doing a tablespoon and a half of our smoked paprika. And I love paprika, which when I was growing up was a very exotic spice to use. My mother used it, and no other moms ever used paprika in anything, so we felt very, very fancy and culinary. Okay, that's a tablespoon and a half of our smoked paprika. And then we're going to do a half teaspoon of our cayenne pepper. Now we're going to mix this all until we have a nice paste. And I mean, it already smells like barbecue in the house, and we haven't done so much as turn on an oven. So that's already pretty impressive. And you want to kind of slather this all over both sides of your brisket. I've cut mine into 2 different halves because it was too big to freeze otherwise. But this is good for roughly 5 or 6 pounds of brisket. And so this is our dry-ish rub that we're putting on. It's kind of a paste, and we're doing this so that we can marinate. Ideally, we're going to be marinating overnight. If you can't manage an overnight marinade because you didn't plan well, and I mean, we're in quarantine, so anything's possible. Either you have tons of time and you can marinate overnight, or you can't keep your wits about you long enough to know what day it is, and so you're not really in planning mode. So, choose your path. But if you can marinate overnight, it's always better. If you can't, that's fine. Just marinate as many hours as you can. I would do at least 1 hour just so that the liquid smoke can work its way into the brisket. But honestly, we're going to be cooking this for so long in the oven that if you can't manage more than an hour to marinate, and again, I would do at the bare minimum an hour marinade. If you can't manage a marinade longer than that, that's fine. We're going to be cooking this a very, very, very long time. So you want to get it all nice and worked into your meat. And I did this on a baking sheet so that I would be able to just pop the whole thing uncovered, almost like we're trying to dry age the beef. Putting the whole thing uncovered into my fridge. I'm not going to do overnight. I'll probably do like a 4-hour marinade on this. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to move it. If you'd like to flip it, because things are getting a little watery in here and you want to pour off some of the liquid that seeps out of the brisket, that's fine. And then just, turn it over and put it back in. Make sure the marinade is still all over it. Of course, clean hands are a cook's best friend. So I will see you when we're ready to pop this bad boy into the oven. So now this has been out of the fridge for about a half hour or so now. I'm going to grab our Le Creuset Dutch oven. Our oven has been preheated to 275. We're going to put both pieces of brisket. And again, this is about 5 or 6 pounds of brisket. I cut mine into 2 pieces because it fits better in the pan that way. You don't have to cut it if yours works perfectly. We're going to cover our brisket, wash off our hands. And And we're going to pop this into our 275-degree oven for 3.5 hours. And while this cooks, I'll show you how we're making our barbecue sauce to go with it. So while our brisket is in the oven, let's get our barbecue sauce started. We're going to put a medium heat over a regular saucepan. Grab my rubber spatula. And I'm going to drop into this saucepan 1 onion, chopped, kind of diced up, 3 cloves of garlic, or however much garlic you like, but there's a lot of seasoning in this dish already, so we don't have to go overboard from the outset. And we're going to cook down our onions and garlic just until they're kind of sweated and a little translucent looking. I'll show you what's going on in the pan. So in addition to the 1 onion and the 3 cloves of garlic, we're going to have 1 cup of apple cider vinegar, 2 cups of regular ketchup, whatever ketchup you like. I'm using Heinz. 1 cup of honey. I actually didn't have an entire cup of honey. I had a half a cup of honey laying around, and so I used a half a cup of molasses also, so that works. We need 2 chipotles in adobo sauce, which is something you can skip if you'd like, but it kicks up the kind of heat and smokiness in your barbecue sauce. Black pepper, kosher salt, and some dry mustard. I have dried mustard seeds, but since we're pulverizing this whole thing when it's done anyway, that's fine, but if you have ground mustard, that's even better. And did I say apple cider vinegar? I can't remember if I said apple cider vinegar. You're gonna need apple cider vinegar. So this is a great kind of general barbecue sauce. You can use this sort of for anything. If you wanted to make chicken with this, you can, but this beef brisket works really well as a barbecued flavor because it's so meaty. It takes flavor really well. So we have all of those delicious kind of smoky, dry rub flavors already on our meat. And then this is going to be a barbecue sauce that we add an hour before our brisket is done cooking. We're going to pour it over our brisket, and take off the cover of our brisket and let all of the flavors get kind of yummy and caramelized and sticky and that kind of good barbecue-y, messy, lick your fingers kind of flavors. So our onions and garlic are starting to get aromatic. They're starting to get a little translucent and a little golden. I know what I forgot that goes in here. We're going to be adding a half cup of water into this, but let's get the rest of the ingredients in first. Whoop. And I'm spilling. Okay. Here's our molasses and honey going in. If you want to use just honey, that's absolutely fine. If you wanted to use a cup of brown sugar because you don't have honey in the house, that would also be absolutely fine. Barbecue sauce is one of those things that's kind of hard to fuck up, so, you know, don't make yourself crazy, don't be a hero. All these flavors are so good, kind of doesn't matter what you do to them. 2 cups of ketchup. All going right into the saucepan. Our seasonings, which are a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of kosher salt, a teaspoon of the mustard, the dried mustard, and 2 chilies, chipotles in adobo sauce that I've minced up. I took the seeds out of one of them just because I didn't want the spice to overpower the dish, but that's absolutely a kind of personal preference thing. Now we're doing 1 cup of apple cider vinegar. Make sure you shake it up so that you get the mother. That's what it's called, the stuff that hangs out in the bottom of your apple cider vinegar. It's called the mother. So you want that in here because it has kind of like magical properties. That's 1 cup of ACV. And then a 1/2 cup of water, because we gotta have something to reduce, right? Get our paws a little less sticky. This is a dish towel I got from my in-laws. It says, Alexa, do the dishes, which is very funny. I don't have an Alexa, I have a Google Home, but it's the same concept. Sometimes you just need your robot butler to do the work for you. So let me show you what's going on in our pot. And we're going to let this cook for a while, like at least 20 minutes. We want this to reduce and thicken. So we're gonna stir it a bunch and then we're just gonna let it kind of cook down. And then we're going to take it off the heat once it's nice and thick. We're gonna let it cool completely. And then we're going to put it, if you have a blender, you could put it in your blender. I have a, food processor that I'm going to be putting into. Ideally, you'd use an immersion blender, a hand blender to do this, but I don't have one of those either. So I used to, and I have like half of it now, and I don't know where the other half went. Must have gotten lost in some move. Already smells so good. That tomatoey ketchup, the kind of tanginess of the mustard, it smells really good. This is going to be an awesome little dish. Okay, so I'm gonna let this cook down and I'll show you what it looks like when it's fully reduced. So our brisket's been cooking about 3 hours now. Here is our unbelievable, thick, rich, amazing barbecue sauce, which I let completely cool and then run it through the food processor so that it gets all nice and pulverized and awesome. So we're going to take our brisket out of the oven, uncover it, put some of our barbecue sauce on, and then pop it back in uncovered. So let's take our brisket out and see how it's doing. Now, while it's been cooking, actually, let me tilt my camera and show you. While it's been cooking, I rotated it twice just to make sure all the sides were getting done. And on the last rotation, which was probably around a half hour ago, I poured some of the liquid that was in there out of it, just to kind of make everything dry out a little more, and so that it didn't start kind of boiling in its own juices. Instead, it really seared a bit. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it again. Actually, before I turn it, let's get some barbecue sauce on this side of the brisket. So I'm just taking, and be very careful, this is very hot. I'm taking a ladle, grabbing some of this amazing barbecue sauce, ladling it over the brisket. I'm using my pastry brush to just kind of smush it in and get it really in all the like nooks and crannies of the brisket. Oh my God, this smells so good. It really does smell like this has been barbecuing the whole day. It's smoky, it's delicious, wildly good. Okay, now let's turn these bad boys over so that we season all sides of our meat. Oh, hell yeah. Whoop! Careful, careful. Nice and browned. This is looking good. This is going to be a serious dinner. And lunch and dinner again. And so we're using in total roughly about a cup of our barbecue sauce. Smush it all in. Make sure you get the sides. We want everything coated. Okay, I'll show you what we have now. That is some luxurious looking meat. Hell yes. So we're going to pop it back in our oven for 1 more hour at least. I don't like it fall apart tender. I actually prefer it to be like you still need to knife it to cut through it. But I will show you what it looks like when it's all done. We're going to put it back in the oven, keeping the oven on like between 275 and 300 uncovered for another hour, and then we'll be good to go. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So our brisket cooked for 1 additional hour with all of the barbecue sauce that we made on it. Here's what we have. It's perfectly tender, perfectly seasoned and smoky. It's sweet, it's smoky, it's completely tender. It's so good that my dog is growling in the background for a piece. Real Southern style, unbelievable barbecued brisket, right in the oven. We barely had to do anything to it. Perfect little down-home cooking snack. Serve it with potato salad, corn, Brussels sprouts, cornbread, mac and cheese, if you really want to be decadent about it. This stuff is awesome. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Cooking from Quarantine. Cook up some brisket. Let me know how it goes. See you soon.